Listen, the Ajumma grabbed Amara's wrist so hard it would leave marks for 3 days. Not from violence, from desperation, from a kind of love Amara didn't understand yet, but would come to crave like oxygen. The Seoul market was chaotic around them, vendors shouting prices in rapid Korean, customers haggling over fish still twitching in plastic buckets. The smell of fermented kimchi mixing with exhaust fumes from delivery scooters weaving dangerously through the narrow aisles. But at that moment, everything else disappeared. There was only this small Korean grandmother, maybe 4'10", with iron-gray hair pulled back so tight it seemed to lift her eyebrows, and eyes that saw straight through Amara's polite smile into the loneliness she'd been hiding for 6 months. The Ajumma's grip tightened. She spoke rapid Korean, words that meant nothing to Amara, but the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a question. This was a declaration. This was a claim. "You are mine now," those eyes said. "You belong to me." And somehow, impossibly, Amara's eyes filled with tears because some part of her soul had been waiting her entire life for someone to claim her exactly like this. With this kind of fierce, unbargaining certainty. This is Afro-K Tales, and today's story isn't your regular. It's modern magic, the kind that happens when two souls from opposite sides of the world recognize each other across every barrier that should have kept them apart. Before we dive deep into this story, before I tell you how a random Korean grandmother adopted a Nigerian woman at a vegetable market and changed both their lives forever, I need you to do something critical right now. Hit that subscribe button. Seriously, don't scroll past this moment. Smash that like button because this story will destroy you emotionally in the best possible way. And I want you to comment below and tell me, what time is it where you are? What country are you watching from? And most importantly, have you ever felt claimed by someone who wasn't of blood family? Have you been adopted by an Ajumma or any grandmother figure who just decided you belonged to them? Share your story below and subscribe for more Afro-Korean moments like this one. We're building something special here. A community of people who understand that family isn't always about blood. It's about choice. It's about love that refuses to ask permission. Now, let me take you back to the moment that changed everything. 6 months before the market incident, Amara had arrived in Seoul with a work visa, one suitcase, and a heart full of hope that was slowly, methodically dying. She'd gotten a job teaching English at a private academy, the kind that worked foreign teachers like machines, paid barely enough to survive in one of the world's most expensive cities, and treated them like replaceable parts in a system that never stopped grinding. Her tiny studio apartment in Itaewon was smaller than her childhood bedroom in Lagos. The bathroom was so small she had to sit on the toilet sideways. The kitchen had a hot plate and a mini fridge. But the worst part wasn't the size. It was the silence. The crushing, suffocating silence of coming home every night to walls that never responded, to a space that felt more like a coffin than a home. Amara had no friends. No family within 6,000 miles. The other foreign teachers at her academy were nice enough, but transient. Always leaving for better opportunities, never staying long enough to build real connection. They'd invite her out for drinks occasionally. She'd go. They'd complain about Korea, about the academy, about their lives, and Adiz would smile and nod and feel even more alone because she couldn't even find comfort in shared misery. She'd never felt so isolated in her life. Video calls home to Nigeria only made it worse. Her mother would ask cheerfully how Seoul was, if she'd made friends, if Korean men were as handsome as in the dramas, if she was eating well, if she was happy. And Amara would lie through her teeth, painting a picture of a life she wasn't living because admitting failure felt impossible. She was supposed to be the success story, the daughter who'd made it abroad, the one living the dream while her sisters were still in Lagos struggling with power cuts and traffic. How could she admit that she was crying herself to sleep most nights, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake, too proud to admit it, too broke to afford a flight home even if she wanted to? The loneliness was a physical weight on her chest. Some days it was hard to breathe. Some days she'd stand in the shower and cry until the water ran cold because it was the only place she could let it out without anyone hearing. Some days she'd walk through the crowded streets of Seoul, surrounded by millions of people, and feel more alone than if she were stranded on a desert island. That's the state Amara was in when she wandered into Mangwon Market on a Saturday afternoon in late October. She'd been in Seoul for exactly 6 months and 2 days. She'd avoided traditional markets before, intimidated by the language barrier, the unfamiliar foods, the way Ajummas would sometimes stare at her like she was an alien who'd crash-landed in their vegetable aisle. But that day, desperate for something, anything, that felt like a connection to humanity, she'd ventured in after seeing a YouTube video about the market's charm and authenticity. The market was overwhelming in the best and worst ways. Endless stalls selling vegetables she couldn't name, fish and octopus still moving in buckets, banchan side dishes in every color of the rainbow, Ajummas sitting on small plastic stools calling out to customers in voices that could shatter glass. The energy was incredible. Alive. Real. So different from the sterile convenience stores and corporate coffee shops that dominated most of Seoul. This was Korea. Actual Korea. The kind tourists paid good money to experience it. Amara walked through it all feeling invisible. Just another foreigner. Just another outsider taking photos for Instagram. She stopped at a vegetable stall, drawn by the familiarity of tomatoes. At least those she recognized. At least those looked the same as in Nigeria. She was examining them, trying to calculate if she could afford to buy some on her pitiful salary, when a voice barked at her in Korean. Sharp. Commanding. The kind of tone that made you stand up straight even if you didn't understand the words. Amara looked up, startled. An elderly Korean woman stood behind the vegetable stall, arms crossed over her chest, eyes narrowed in assessment. She was tiny, couldn't have been more than 4'10", but she radiated the kind of authority that made Amara instinctively straighten her spine. The Ajumma spoke again, rapid Korean that Adiz couldn't follow, gesturing at Amara's face, her body, her clothes with quick, sharp movements. "I'm sorry," Amara stammered, her face burning with embarrassment. "I don't speak Korean." "English? Do you speak English?" She felt like an idiot. Like every ugly American stereotype, even though she was Nigerian. Like the worst kind of foreigner who expected everyone to cater to her language. But the Ajumma's expression changed in an instant. Her eyes widened. The hardness in her face melted into something Amara couldn't identify. Shock. Recognition? Something deeper? The Ajumma stepped out from behind the stall, moving with surprising speed for someone who looked well into her 70s. She grabbed Amara's wrist, not roughly but firmly, with the kind of grip that said this is non-negotiable, and pulled her closer, studying her face like she was memorizing every detail. Like she was trying to solve a puzzle only she could see. The Ajumma spoke again, softer now. Still Korean, but the tone had shifted completely from irritation to something else. Something that sounded almost like wonder. Like recognition. Like finding something lost. "I really don't understand," Amara said helplessly. But tears were suddenly threatening because this woman was touching her with such intention, such focus, and Amara hadn't been touched by another human being with genuine care in 6 months. The loneliness she'd been suppressing, pushing down, pretending didn't exist, crashed over her like a wave. Her throat tightened. Her vision blurred. The Ajumma saw the tears. Her expression transformed into something fierce and protective, the way a mother looks at a wounded child. She barked something to the Ajumma at the neighboring stall, who looked over, saw what was happening, and laughed, responding in Korean with what sounded like teasing approval. Then the Ajumma turned back to Amara and did something that made absolutely no sense. She pulled a large plastic bag from under her stall and started filling it with aggressive efficiency. Tomatoes, cucumbers, leafy greens Amara didn't recognize, Korean pears that looked perfect, a container of kimchi, another container of what looked like marinated vegetables. She packed it all with the precision of someone who'd done this 10,000 times, then thrust the heavy bag into Amara's arms and said one word that Amara did understand because she'd heard it in approximately 700 K-dramas during her lonely nights. "Gaja, let's go." Amara blinked, confused, the heavy bag pulling at her arms. "Go where?" "I can't. I haven't paid for these." The Ajumma waved her hand dismissively. "The universal gesture for your money means nothing to me." She switched to broken English, cobbled together from who knows where, maybe K-dramas, maybe tourist interactions, maybe sheer force of will. "You." She pointed at Amara with a firm finger, too skinny. "No, eat properly." She mimed eating, shoveling imaginary food into her mouth, then pointed at herself with pride. "I feed. You come. Now." This was insane. This was a complete stranger. This was exactly how people ended up on true crime documentaries. But Amara found herself nodding, found herself following as this tiny Korean grandmother closed up her vegetable stall, hung a handwritten sign Amara couldn't read, and started walking briskly through the market, turning back every few seconds to make sure Amara was following, waving her forward impatiently whenever Amara hesitated. If you're already feeling this connection, if you understand what it means to be claimed by someone unexpected, drop a comment right now and tell me about it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This story is about to get even more emotional. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you need to see this through to the end. They walked for 15 minutes through winding streets that got progressively quieter, residential, away from the market chaos. The Ajumma chatted in Korean the entire time like Amara could understand every word, occasionally throwing in English words, eat, good, daughter, home, that made no contextual sense but somehow conveyed meaning anyway. Amara followed in a complete daze, clutching the heavy bag of vegetables, her logical mind screaming that this was ridiculous, that she should turn around, that this violated every safety rule she'd ever learned, while her desperately lonely heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was exactly what she needed. Maybe the universe was finally throwing her a lifeline. They arrived at a small apartment building, nothing fancy, the kind of older complex that filled Seoul's neighborhoods, with laundry hanging from balconies and bicycles locked up outside. The Ajumma led her up to the third floor, her pace never slowing despite her age, and unlocked a door, ushering Amara inside with the kind of bossy authority that made resistance impossible. The apartment was small, maybe 400 square feet total, but it was immaculately clean and smelled like home in a way Amara couldn't explain. Not her home, not Nigeria, but someone's home. A real home where people lived and loved and fought and made up. Family photos covered one wall, a mix of old black and white portraits and newer color photos. Korean dramas played on a small TV in the corner. Dishes were drying in a rack by the sink. Plants sat on the windowsill. Life was happening in every corner of this space. Sit, the Ajumma commanded, pointing at a low table surrounded by floor cushions. Amara sat obediently, still clutching the vegetable bag like a security blanket. The Ajumma took it from her with a satisfied nod and disappeared into the kitchen, which was barely separated from the main room by a counter. For 20 minutes, Amara sat in stunned silence while this woman she'd met 40 minutes ago cooked. The sounds coming from the kitchen were hypnotic. Sizzling, chopping with the rapid-fire precision of someone who'd been wielding a knife for 50 years. The sharp tang of gochujang chili flakes hitting hot oil. The rich, deep, almost meaty depth of doenjang's soybean paste. Garlic. So much garlic. The smell alone was making Amara's stomach growl with a hunger she'd been ignoring for months. When the Ajumma emerged from the kitchen, she carried enough food for 5 people. A huge bowl of perfectly cooked rice, each grain distinct. Multiple banchan side dishes in small bowls, seasoned spinach, bean sprouts, pickled radish, 3 kinds of kimchi. Kimchi jjigae stew that steamed and bubbled in its stone pot, the surface glistening with red oil. Grilled mackerel that fell apart at the touch. Seasoned cucumber. Marinated perilla leaves. She set it all on the table with the efficiency of a restaurant server, sat across from Amara, and pointed at the food with a look that made it clear this was not a request. Eat. Now. Amara picked up the spoon with hands that shook slightly. She took a bite of the stew. The flavors exploded on her tongue in layers, spicy heat that built slowly, rich umami depth from the doenjang, the slight funk of fermented kimchi, the silky texture of tofu, the tender bite of pork. It was the most delicious thing she'd tasted in 6 months. No longer. Maybe ever. And something inside her, some wall she'd been maintaining to survive, just broke. She started crying. Not delicate tears that she could wipe away discreetly. Full body sobbing that shook her shoulders and made her nose run. 6 months of loneliness poured out while she shoved rice and stew into her mouth simultaneously, eating and crying, unable to stop either one. The food was breaking her. The kindness was destroying her. This stranger's casual, bossy generosity was demolishing every defense Amara had built. The Ajumma didn't look shocked. Didn't ask questions Amara couldn't have answered anyway. She just reached across the table and patted Amara's hand with rough, work-worn fingers, making soothing noises that transcended language, and kept refilling her rice bowl every time it got close to empty. kept pushing banchan closer, keep ladling more stew, kept feeding her with the kind of relentless care that said, I see you're broken, and I'm going to fix it with food, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. When Amara finally stopped crying, emptied out emotionally, and uncomfortably full of food for the first time in months, the Ajumma smiled. A real smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes and made her look 10 years younger. Good, she said, nodding with satisfaction. You eat well now. She pointed at herself, tapping her chest. Halmeoni, grandmother. Then she pointed at Amara with that same decisive finger. Detail, daughter. Amara shook her head, laughing through the residual tears and snot she was wiping with the tissue Halmeoni had wordlessly handed her. No, I'm not your daughter. I'm nobody. I'm just a girl you found at the market. The Ajumma's expression turned stubborn. Her jaw set in a way that suggested this was not up for debate. She repeated firmly, tapping the table for emphasis, Dao. My daughter. Then she added in her broken English, mixing Korean words Amara was starting to understand through sheer repetition, I have son. Good son. Now I have a daughter too. You. She pointed at Amara like she was claiming territory. Mine now. Before Amara could mount any kind of protest, before she could explain that this wasn't how families worked, that you couldn't just adopt random foreigners you found crying at vegetable stalls, the apartment door opened. A man walked in, maybe early 30s, tall for a Korean man, probably 5'11" or 6 feet, well dressed in business casual, a button-down shirt and slacks, clearly just off work. He stopped dead in the doorway when he saw Amara sitting at his mother's table, surrounded by empty dishes and used tissues, her eyes still red and puffy from crying. He said something in Korean that sounded like a question, his tone caught between confusion and amusement. Halmeoni responded cheerfully, gesturing at Amara with obvious pride, speaking rapid Korean that made the man's eyebrows climb toward his hairline. His eyes widened. He looked at Amara, then at his mother's, then back at Amara, then back at his mother with an expression that clearly said this is very on brand for you, but still surprising. Then he did something Amara didn't expect. He laughed, a real laugh, warm and genuine, that transformed his serious face into something boyish. Of course she did, he said in perfect, unaccented English. Of course my mother adopted someone at the market. He turned to Amara and bowed politely, a perfect 90-degree angle. I'm Jun-ho. Apparently your new brother, according to my mother's unilateral decision. Welcome to the family, I guess. Amara stood quickly, awkwardly, almost knocking over the kimchi jjigae pot, bowing back in a way that probably looked ridiculous. I'm so sorry, I don't know what happened. She grabbed me at the market and brought me here and fed me, and I didn't mean to intrude. I should go. This is your home, and I'm a complete stranger. Jun-ho held up a hand, still smiling. If my mother brought you here and fed you, you're not a stranger. You're family now. There's no point fighting it. I learned that lesson years ago. When my mother decides something, the universe rearranges itself to accommodate her will. Halmeoni beamed at her son, clearly pleased even though she couldn't understand most of what he'd said. She spoke to him in Korean, gesturing at Amara, her tone making it clear she was giving instructions. Jun-ho listened, nodded, responded, then turned back to Amara. My mother wants me to tell you that you're coming back next Saturday, and the Saturday after that, and basically every Saturday forever. She's going to feed you and teach you Korean and make sure you're not lonely anymore. She pointed at Amara when she said lonely, so she knows. Somehow she always knows. Tears threatened again. Amara blinked them back. That's very kind, but I can't impose it like that. It's not an imposition, Jun-ho said gently. It's what my mother does. She collects people who need collecting. And apparently, he looked at Amara with something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. You needed collecting. And that's how Amara accidentally got adopted by a Korean grandmother at a vegetable market. But that was just the beginning of the story. Because what started as a bizarre act of kindness was about to become complicated in ways none of them could have predicted. Especially when Jun-ho started looking at Amara less like a sister and more like something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something that could destroy the fragile family they were building or make it real in ways that terrified everyone involved. Before we continue, I need to know, are you hooked? Because this is where things get messy and beautiful and complicated. If you want to see what happens when Jun-ho realizes his feelings, when his Korean girlfriend shows up, when Halmeoni has to choose between tradition and the daughter she claimed, you need to hit that like button right now. Comment below and tell me, Team Jun-ho or Team Stay Just Family? What would you do in this situation? And subscribe for more Afro-Korean moments because we're just getting started. This story is about to break your heart and put it back together. Let's continue. The adoption wasn't a one-time act of kindness. It was a permanent restructuring of Amara's entire existence. The next day, Sunday, Halmeoni showed up at Amara's studio apartment at 8 in the morning. Amara still had no idea how she'd gotten the address, maybe from asking around at the English Academy, maybe through some grandmother intelligence network that operated outside normal logic, maybe through sheer force of will manifesting the information. But there she was, arms loaded with plastic containers of food, barking rapid Korean and pushing her way inside the moment Amara opened the door in her pajamas, still half asleep. Halmeoni took one look at Amara's tiny apartment, and her face did something complicated. Sadness, anger, determination. Offense that someone, especially someone she'd claimed as her daughter, was living in a space this small, this sad, this obviously lonely. She spoke to Amara in her fractured English, mixing in Korean words, gesturing wildly at the cramped space, the single hot plate that passed for a kitchen, the bathroom that was basically a closet with plumbing. The gist that Amara could decipher through the linguistic chaos was that this apartment was unacceptable, that Halmeoni was personally offended, and that changes were happening immediately. "You come to my house," Halmeoni declared, setting down her containers and opening the tiny refrigerator to judge its contents, making disapproving noises at what she found there. "Every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, eat, rest, family, no more alone." Amara tried to protest, still foggy with sleep and overwhelmed by this tiny hurricane of a woman reorganizing her refrigerator without permission. "You don't have to do this. Really, I'm fine. I can take care of myself." Halmeoni stopped what she was doing and fixed Amara with a look that could have melted steel. She pointed at Amara's too thin frame, at the dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, at the empty apartment that screamed loneliness. "Not fine," she said firmly. "Skinny. Sad. Alone." She tapped her chest. "Mother sees everything. Mother knows." And then she went back to reorganizing the refrigerator, the matter clearly settled in her mind. And that was that. Every Saturday after that, Amara found herself at Halmeoni's apartment. Sometimes Jun-ho was there, sometimes not. When he was there, he'd translate his mother's rapid-fire Korean, explain the cultural context of whatever Halmeoni was trying to teach Amara, and mediate when the language barrier created confusion or comedy. Usually both. Jun-ho was patient in ways Amara hadn't expected, kind without being condescending, funny in a dry, understated way that caught her off guard and made her laugh when she least expected it. He worked in marketing for a tech company, spoke fluent English from studying abroad at UCLA, and seemed genuinely amused by his mother's forceful adoption project rather than resentful of the stranger taking up his mother's time and attention. "She does this," he explained one Saturday while Halmeoni was in the kitchen, the sounds of aggressive vegetable chopping providing background percussion. "Collects strays who need help. Last year, it was a Vietnamese exchange student from her church who was struggling. Years before that, an elderly Japanese tourist who got lost and somehow ended up at our apartment for 3 days. But you." He paused, looking at Amara thoughtfully in a way that made something flutter in her chest. "You're different. She talks about you constantly. Show your picture to everyone at the market. Brags about her beautiful black daughter to anyone who'll listen. You've become her actual daughter somehow, not just a project." Amara felt warmth spread through her chest, unfamiliar and almost uncomfortable in its intensity. "I don't understand why, though. We can barely communicate half the time. I murder the Korean language every time I try to speak it." Jun-ho smiled, and Amara noticed for the first time that he had a slight dimple in his left cheek when he smiled like that. "My mother doesn't need words. She operates on some emotional frequency the rest of us can't access. She decided you needed her, so now you have her. Forever. There's no escape. No return policy. You're stuck with her." He said it jokingly, but Amara heard the truth underneath. Halmeoni's love, once given, was absolute, unconditional, immovable, and somehow, impossibly, Amara had earned it just by being sad at a vegetable stall. The months passed. Fall turned to winter. Seoul got cold in ways Lagos never prepared Amara for, and Halmeoni showed up at her apartment with a huge puffy coat, scarves, gloves, scolding her about not dressing warmly enough. Amara's Korean improved from Halmeoni's constant teaching, pointing at objects and repeating words with the patience of someone teaching a toddler, until Amara could have basic conversations, could understand maybe 60% of what Halmeoni said, could make herself understood in return. Amara taught Halmeoni English phrases, though Halmeoni usually mangled them in creative ways that made Jun-ho laugh until tears streamed down his face. Amara started bringing friends from work to meet Halmeoni. The tiny apartment became a gathering place for lonely foreigners in Seoul. Halmeoni would cook massive amounts of food, beam with pride as teachers from America, Canada, South Africa, and the Philippines complimented her cooking, and introduce Amara to everyone as Natal, my daughter, with such absolute conviction that eventually even the skeptical co-workers started believing it. But something else was happening too. Something Amara didn't notice at first, because she was too busy soaking up the family warmth she'd been starving for. Jun-ho started showing up more often on Saturdays, started staying longer instead of disappearing to meet friends, started asking Amara questions about her life in Nigeria, her family, her dreams, her fears, her opinions on everything from Korean politics to the best K-dramas to whether she preferred coffee or tea. Started looking at her in ways that made her heart skip beats she told herself were imaginary, were just her lonely heart misreading basic friendliness. Because this was impossible, Amara reminded herself sternly every time she caught herself noticing how Jun-ho's eyes crinkled when he laughed, or how his hands moved when he explained something he was passionate about, or how he always made sure she got the best pieces of meat when they ate Korean barbecue. Jun-ho was Korean, from a traditional family. Surely his mother would expect him to marry a nice Korean girl, someone appropriate, someone who fit into the cultural expectations. And Amara was just a charity project, the adopted daughter, the foreigner who needed help. Nothing more. It would be ridiculous, inappropriate, messy to think of him as anything else. Except Jun-ho's eyes said differently. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention was different. The way he always positioned himself next to her, close enough that their shoulders touched, said different. It came to a head 6 months after the market adoption. Early spring, when Seoul was finally warming up and cherry blossoms were starting to appear. Halmeoni had invited Amara to a family dinner, a big one, with extended relatives coming to celebrate her birthday. She'd insisted Amara dress nicely, wear the beautiful hanbok she'd bought for Amara as a gift, the gorgeous deep blue one with pink accents that must have cost a fortune. Meet the family properly, Halmeoni had said through Jun-ho's translation. Show them my beautiful daughter. Amara arrived nervous, wearing the hanbok that felt both foreign and somehow right on her body, her hair braided in an elaborate style that had taken 3 hours. The apartment was crowded with people, aunts and uncles and cousins and family friends, all speaking rapid Korean, all stopping mid-conversation to stare when Amara walked in. The silence was deafening. Amara wanted to disappear into the floor, but Halmeoni grabbed her hand and pulled her to the center of the room with pride radiating from every inch of her tiny frame. She announced something in Korean, gesturing at Amara, her voice carrying clearly over the resumed conversations. Jun-ho, standing nearby looking uncomfortable in a formal hanbok, translated quietly for Amara. She's telling them you're her daughter, that you've brought joy back into her life after my father died 5 years ago, that you filled a hole in her heart she thought would stay empty forever, that your family now, blood or no blood. The relatives' faces showed everything. Confusion from the older generation. Skepticism from some of the middle-aged aunts who clearly had opinions. Curiosity from the younger cousins. But also, in some of the older women's eyes, Amara saw understanding. Recognition. They knew what Halmeoni had done. They understood the Korean tradition of chosen family, of claiming people who needed claiming, of love that transcended biology. The dinner was overwhelming. Too many people asking questions Jun-ho had to translate. Too much food that Amara was expected to try. Too much attention on her, the curiosity both kind and uncomfortable. But Halmeoni stayed by her side the entire time, protective, making sure she had enough food, translating through Jun-ho when needed, beaming every time someone complimented how beautiful Amara looked in the hanbok, responding in Korean with what Jun-ho later translated as yes. My daughter is the most beautiful, isn't she? After dinner, When Amara's face hurt from smiling and her stomach was uncomfortably full, Jun-ho found her on the small balcony, escaping the crowd, breathing in the cool spring air. He handed her a cup of tea and stood beside her in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only exists between people who've moved past the need to fill every moment with words. "You okay?" he asked finally. Overwhelmed, Amara admitted. "Your family is wonderful, but it's a lot. Some of your aunts look like they wanted to dissect me scientifically." Jun-ho laughed softly. "They're just curious. They've never seen my mother attached to someone who isn't blood. It's making them reconsider things they thought they knew about family." He paused. "My aunt already asked my mother if she's trying to set us up romantically." Amara's heart stopped, then started again too fast. She forced a laugh that sounded fake even to her own ears. "That's ridiculous." Jun-ho was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. "Seriously, is it?" The air between them changed. Charged. Dangerous. The city lights of Seoul stretched out before them, millions of people living their lives. But at that moment it felt like they were the only two people in the world. Amara turned to face him, her heart hammering. "Jun-ho, your mother adopted me because she's kind and I needed help. I'm like your sister now." "That would be weird." "Wrong." Jun-ho's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the balcony railing. "You're not my sister, Amara. Trust me. Nothing about how I feel about you is brotherly. Not even a little bit." The confession hung between them like something physical. Amara couldn't breathe. Before she could respond, before she could process what he'd just said, Halmeoni called from inside, her voice cutting through the moment. Jun-ho's expression shifted, shuddered, walls going up. He went back inside without another word, leaving Amara on the balcony with her heart racing, her mind spinning, and the terrifying knowledge that she felt exactly the same way. If your heart is racing right now, if you need to know what happens next, hit that like button. Comment and tell me, is this wrong or is this beautiful? Can adopted siblings fall in love or is that crossing a line? And subscribe because the next part is where everything explodes. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. 2 weeks later, everything exploded in the worst possible way. Jun-ho showed up at Halmeoni's apartment on a Saturday when Amara was there helping cook flour on her face from attempting to make mandu dumplings under Halmeoni's critical supervision. But Jun-ho wasn't alone. He brought a woman. Sleek. Beautiful in that effortless Korean way Amara could never achieve. Obviously sophisticated, wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than Amara made in 3 months. Obviously the kind of woman Jun-ho should be dating. "This is me, son," Jun-ho said stiffly, speaking in English so Amara would understand, his face carefully neutral. "We've been seeing each other for a few weeks." Amara felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. The flour-covered spoon she'd been holding clattered to the floor. Halmeoni's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise. Assessment. Deep, immediate disapproval. She said something in Korean, her tone sharp, that made Jun-ho's jaw clench and Mi-sun's polite smile tighten at the edges. Jun-ho responded in Korean, his voice firm but respectful. His mother responded sharper, not bothering to moderate her tone. They were arguing. About what exactly, Amara couldn't tell through her limited Korean, but the tension was suffocating. Mi-sun stood there looking uncomfortable but maintaining her poised exterior, occasionally interjecting something in Korean that sounded defensive. Mi-sun turned to Amara with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be the African girl Jun-ho's mother adopted. How charitable of her. So kind to help people from." She paused delicately, less fortunate circumstances. The dismissal in her tone was crystal clear. The subtle racism wrapped in politeness. Amara felt herself shrink, felt all her insecurities about being an outsider, about being charity, about being not enough, about not belonging, crash back with devastating force. All the progress she'd made, all the confidence Halmeoni had built in her, crumbled in seconds. Halmeoni saw it. Her eyes flashed with fury. She spoke rapidly to Jun-ho, pointing at Mi-sun, then at Amara, her voice rising with each word. Jun-ho tried to calm her, placing a hand on her shoulder, but Halmeoni shook him off. She was beyond furious. She was offended on a fundamental level. She turned to Amara and switched to English, her broken English that Amara had grown to love. "You." She pointed at Amara with fierce emphasis, "My real daughter. Heart daughter." She tapped her chest hard. "This one." She pointed at Mi-sun with barely concealed disgust, "No heart." Pretty face, ugly soul. Jun-ho made a big mistake. Mi-sun's face flushed red with anger and humiliation. She spoke rapidly in Korean to Jun-ho, her voice rising, clearly demanding he translate or defend her or do something. Jun-ho looked completely torn, trapped between his mother's fury and his girlfriend's wounded pride and Amara's obvious devastation. "Yama, please," Jun-ho said quietly in Korean, then switching to English. "This isn't fair to anyone. Can we just have a calm meal?" "Calm." Halmeoni switched to Korean, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Jun-ho translated automatically, probably without thinking. "She's asking how she's supposed to be calm when you bring this woman who insults her daughter in her own home." "I didn't insult anyone," Mi-sun said in perfect English, dropping the pretense. "I stated a fact. Your mother did a charitable thing taking in a foreigner who needed help. That's admirable. But let's not pretend this girl is actually your family." The word girl hit Amara like a slap. The dismissiveness, the condescension, the way Mi-sun said it, like Amara was a child, a project, something less than a full person. Amara couldn't take it anymore. She stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. "I need to go," she said, her voice shaking. "Thank you for having me, Halmeoni. I'm sorry for causing trouble." "You caused no trouble," Halmeoni said urgently, reaching for her. "She causes trouble." She pointed at Mi-sun. "You stay." She goes. But Amara was already grabbing her bag, already moving toward the door. She heard Jun-ho call her name, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. She needed to get out before she broke down completely, before she cried in front of Mi-sun and proved every dismissive thing that woman thought about her. She ran down the stairs and out into the street, tears streaming, humiliation burning through her chest. Behind her, she could hear raised voices, Halmeoni and Jun-ho arguing, but she kept going. Ran until her lungs burned. Until she was far enough away that she could collapse on a bench in a small park and let the sobs come. She'd been fooling herself, playing pretend. Halmeoni's kindness was real, but that didn't make Amara actually family. She was still an outsider. The project, the charity case. And Jun-ho, whatever she'd thought she'd seen in his eyes, he was dating someone appropriate. Someone Korean. Someone who fit into his world in ways Amara never could. That balcony confession had probably been a moment of confusion, nothing more. This, Mi-sun, this was reality. That night, Amara made a decision. She needed to create distance. Stop going to Halmeoni's every weekend. Stop pretending she was part of a family she could never truly belong to. It would hurt, but it would hurt less than being constantly reminded that she didn't fit, that she was tolerated but not truly accepted by the wider world Jun-ho lived in. She sent Halmeoni a text message, carefully composed in her broken Korean with Google Translate's help. "Thank you for everything. You've been so kind. But I think I need some space. I'll visit again soon." Halmeoni called immediately. Amara didn't answer. Called again and again. Sent voice messages in Korean that Amara couldn't bring herself to translate. Jun-ho texted too. "Amara, please talk to me. My mother is devastated. I'm devastated. Mi-sun and I aren't together anymore. We had a massive fight after you left. She said terrible things and I ended it. Please come back." Amara stared at that message for a long time, then turned off her phone. For 3 days, she avoided everyone. Called in sick to work. Stayed in her tiny apartment. She ate ramen and cried and told herself this was for the best. That she needed to stop depending on people who could never really be her family. That she needed to stand on her own. On the 4th day, someone knocked on her door. Persistent knocking that didn't stop. Amara ignored it. The knocking continued. Then she heard Halmeoni's voice, speaking Korean through the door, pleading. Amara opened the door. Halmeoni stood there looking smaller than usual, older, worried. The moment she saw Amara's face, her expression crumpled. She pushed her way inside and pulled Amara into a hug. This tiny Korean grandmother holding this tall Nigerian woman, both of them crying. Halmeoni spoke in Korean, words tumbling out. Amara caught maybe half. "Sorry. Love you. My daughter. Don't leave. Family. Please. I don't belong," Amara said through tears. Mi-sun was right. "I'm not really your family. I'm just someone you felt sorry for." Halmeoni pulled back, gripped Amara's face between her hands, forcing eye contact. She spoke in her broken English, every word deliberate. "You are my daughter. Not sorry. Not charity. Love. Real love. She tapped Amara's chest, then her own. The heart knows. Blood doesn't matter. Heart matters. The words broke something open in Amara. She collapsed into Halmeoni's arms again, sobbing, all the fear and hurt pouring out. They sat on Amara's floor for an hour, Halmeoni holding her, speaking soft Korean, stroking her hair. Eventually Jun-ho arrived. Halmeoni must have texted him. He took one look at the scene and his face did something complicated. Can we talk? He asked Amara quietly. Please. Halmeoni stood, patted both their heads like they were children, and announced she was going to make food in Amara's inadequate kitchen. She disappeared, giving them privacy but making it clear she wasn't leaving. Jun-ho sat on the floor across from Amara. I ended things with me, son, he said. Completely. Not because of the fight, though that was bad, but because being with her made me realize I was trying to force something that wasn't real. Trying to do what was expected instead of what I actually wanted. Amara's heart was pounding. What do you want? Jun-ho met her eyes. You. I want you. I know it's complicated. I know my mother adopted you, which makes it weird. I know we're supposed to be siblings now, which is a mess. I know you're from Nigeria, and I'm Korean, and there are a million cultural complications. But I don't care. I've been falling for you since the first Saturday you came over and tried to make kimchi, and it was so bad my mother laughed for 10 minutes straight. Amara couldn't breathe. Jun-ho, this is impossible. Your family will never accept it. Korean society won't accept it. We're supposed to be brother and sister. My mother loves you, Jun-ho said firmly. Not as my sister. As her daughter. Those are different things. And if she's okay with it, everyone else can adjust. He hesitated. The question is, do you feel the same way? Or am I making this incredibly awkward? Amara looked at this man who'd been kind to her from the beginning, who'd translated for his mother's fierce love, who'd made her laugh when she'd forgotten how. I feel the same way, she whispered. I've been trying not to, but I do. Jun-ho's face transformed. Relief, joy, hope. Then we figure it out. Together. With my mother's blessing. He glanced toward the kitchen where Halmeoni was humming. And I think we have that already. As if summoned, Halmeoni appeared with instant ramen for 3 people. She looked at them sitting close on the floor, saw something in their faces, and smiled. A knowing smile. She said something in Korean that made Jun-ho laugh. What did she say? Amara asked. Jun-ho grinned. She said she knew this would happen. That she didn't adopt you to be my sister. She adopted you because she saw how I looked at you that first day and decided you were good enough for her son. Apparently, this was her plan all along. Halmeoni nodded, pleased with herself. She pointed at them both. Good couple. Beautiful babies later. She mimed rocking a baby. Yama. Jun-ho's face flushed red. But Amara was laughing. Really laughing. For the first time in days. This family, this impossible, wonderful, complicated family she'd accidentally fallen into. 2 months later, Jun-ho took Amara to a nice restaurant and told her he loved her. In Korean first, then in English. Sarangi. I love you. Amara said it back in Korean, the words feeling natural now. Nato Sarangi. 6 months after that, at Halmeoni's birthday dinner with the entire extended family present, Jun-ho stood up. He'd told Amara he was going to make a speech thanking his mother. He did. But then he turned to Amara. Speaking in Korean so everyone could understand. With Amara following along with her improved language skills, Jun-ho talked about how his mother had found Amara at the market. How she'd claimed her as family. How Amara had brought light back into their home. And then he switched to English. Amara, you came into our lives as my mother's daughter. But I'd like you to become something more. He got down on one knee. The room went silent. Will you marry me? Amara's hands flew to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. The entire family was watching. Halmeoni was beaming, clearly in on this plan. Yes, Amara whispered. Then louder, in Korean so everyone could hear. Yes. Any young. The room erupted. Halmeoni was crying happy tears. Cousins were cheering. Even the skeptical aunts were clapping. And in that moment, Amara understood something profound. Family wasn't about blood. It was about choice. About showing up. About a tiny Korean grandmother who'd grabbed her wrist at a vegetable market and decided, this one is mine. So that's the story of how a random Korean Ajumma adopted a Nigerian woman and changed her entire life. How kindness from a stranger became family. How love doesn't ask permission from tradition or society. It just happens. If you've watched this far, if this story touched your heart, I need you to do something. Hit that like button right now. Comment below and tell me your story. Have you been adopted by an Ajumma or any grandmother figure who just claimed you? Have you found family in unexpected places? Share your story. We're building a community of people who understand that family is about love, not blood. And subscribe to Afro-K Tales because in a few days, I'm bringing you another story about love that crosses borders and breaks rules. Remember, sometimes the family you need finds you when you least expect it. Sometimes love comes from a vegetable market. Sometimes the best things in life start with a stranger grabbing your wrist and saying, "You're mine now." This is Afro-K Tales. Until next time, stay open to unexpected family. Stay open to love that doesn't make sense. And remember that the best adventures start when you follow a tiny Korean grandmother who's decided you belong to her.